Welcome. Gio and I are here today with Lee Linton. He is an Office Evolution franchisee in Georgetown, which is north of Austin. And Lee, I can't wait to hear your story. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, we'll give credit to Gio. Gio is our guest sourcer most of the time. So, which is fun for me because then I'm like, okay, where did Lee come from? What do we want to know from Lee?
Between the two
Yeah.
of you, you have probably a lot of community in common, but a lot of community that you bring to each other.
Exactly, which is very fun. Wait, you know what? The standout on your LinkedIn profile for me was that you were a youth baseball commissioner.
Yeah, I coached baseball with my son all the way until we turned him over to college or to high school coaches, me and three other dads that we had a good time. That was one of the probably the most fun I've had, doing anything is working with those kids. We formed a team when they were 10, kept the team together for 4.5 years, nine of
That's
the
fun.
original players. And just basically went around collecting rings and trophies for, summer baseball
Wait,
tournaments.
does the credit go to the coaches or to the players?
No, they were some of the best kids. Our whole goal was to prepare all of them to be ready for the rigors of competitive baseball and high school level. And if they so chose to take it to the college level, then so be it. Some did, some didn't. My son gave it up. He wanted to go to a big school and have a big school experience, and he really was only going to qualify to play at a small school. So
Yep.
I was actually impressed that he was able to articulate his willingness to hang it up
Yeah. Yeah.
versus continue to pursue something that, playing Major League Baseball was never a dream of his. So he was willing to give it up and go to a big school and have big school experience. And he's graduating in May.
Oh, congrats. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Is he gonna come work in the family business or does he have plans of his own?
No, he's got plans of his own. He's getting a degree in finance and he's got three different opportunities in that space that are all very interesting for different reasons. Some are consultative with kind of a sales flair, some are purely sales, and others are purely analyst. So he's got anything from the two extremes of what I think he could afford himself. He's just got to decide, what he wants to wake up and do every day.
Yeah, at least to start. You never know.
That's what I told him. It's not your forever job.
Exactly. Okay, so Gio, I'm totally taking over, but yeah, okay, so walk us through your background and then how did you end up with Office Evolution and co-working?
So I was a franchise owner years ago of three different franchise brands in the retail space and food service space. I was the sweat equity in a partnership, and my partner knew the real estate space really well in Houston, Texas. And so we partnered mostly with GNC stores, General Nutrition Center. That was my background in college. My background, was a science background, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And so the opportunity to own a business without having to have the money to, pony up to get into it. And I was never, going to be the majority owner or even an equal partner, but that was my first foray into it. I come from an entrepreneurial family. My dad's owned his own businesses his whole life in the automotive repair space. My mom was a nurse and a practitioner or a clinic manager, for an orthopedic group for, nearly 30 years. So I was very accustomed to watching people work hard. So that never bothered me to also go out and work hard. So being the sweat equity partner and an opportunity to gain more of the business over time is kind of what I did. We sold it all away and sold it all back to the franchisors when the franchisors were coming to buy units back from multi-unit owners. And then I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I called my broker and said, "What's going on? What's out there that's good and hot and needs people?" And he said, "Telecommunications just deregulated. They can't get enough people." So I literally went to Men's Warehouse, bought a suit, two or three shirts, two or three ties, and started the interview process. Cold called five companies, got offers from four of them, and that started a 25-year career in that space where I, was willing to move. So I tracked quickly in promotions and gravitated to the data side of the business, which the voice was the hot market, but it was very I didn't like that very much. And so I gravitated to the data side. And lo and behold, the whole world became all about data
Yeah.
in a short amount of time. And when I got out of that industry in 2016, 2016, I left that industry and went actually to do what I thought would be the last thing I would do professionally. I got back to my roots, my science roots, and we opened a healthcare company that we basically were providing a fee for service product where we were basically using people's existing annual, health fair data for their blood work. And then we were risk stratifying the people that, basically were on the path to chronic illness or chronic disease, primarily diabetes and heart
Hmm.
disease. And then we were going into the employers who were paying for their plans and just saying, hey, wouldn't you like to know who is at most risk in your population? And of course, they would always say yes. And then they would give us permission to reach out to those people. And then we would put them in a year-long program to basically what we would say is back them off the cliff of chronic disease.
Yeah.
And I thought that'd be the last thing I would do. And then our majority partner in that opportunity or that company decided that he didn't want to get stuck in the healthcare space again, where he was when Obamacare became a reality. And so he wanted to get out of anything he was
Mm.
involved in that touched patients. And so he showed up to our budget meeting in 2019, which was the first year we were really going to have significant revenues,
Uh-huh.
and instead said, I want out. And so that was the beginning of the end of that. And so then I was like, this is really what I thought, the last thing I thought I was going to do. And I was going to sell it and make multiples on,
Yes.
nearly no debt and then figure out what I wanted to do. So this is a surprise. So anyway, by the middle of 2019, I had re-explored franchising again. And I kind of narrowed down to really the basis. And this is what I used to do all the time in my previous industry. I would just be honest with myself and say, what do you enjoy doing and what do you never want to do again? And I landed on the two things I enjoy the most professionally are connecting people and helping their companies grow. And I watched it firsthand of what companies could do when they could get access to fiber networks when fiber was not so available. And so I really gravitated to those two things. And then when I hired the franchise consultant to, help me hone in on what makes most sense and, to capitalize on those two interests, co-working really was the one that just kept, raising up and saying, this is it, this is it, this is it. And it really has proven to be that. I knew it would be, somewhat that way. We use the word community a lot in this business. And there really is a lot of community. There's just a lot of opportunity to, if you're paying attention, really help people to help their businesses, be the best that they can be and do more than maybe they're doing. If you know what they do and you know what somebody else does and they need each other, then just make the introductions. And so that's kind of what I did. 2019, we did a development agreement to do multiple locations on the Austin service area. So we did our Round Rock location first. We sat out the pandemic, and then we did our Round Rock location. We opened it in 2022. So and then almost exactly on the 3-year anniversary of that, we opened our Georgetown location. And in the interim, we also expanded our Round Rock location, added about 40% more square footage, and took half of another floor. So we have half of a building in Round Rock, and then about 10 miles up the road, we have our Georgetown location, which is almost the exact same square footage, but all on one floor.
How many square feet?
About it's between 11.5 and 12.
Okay. So the original location was small.
About 8,500.
Oh, 8,500. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Yep.
So, and it's been an interesting business. My wife started, just doing things outside the business, not inside the business. And as time has gone on, she's now, one of our community managers that, is in and out of both locations, like I'm in and out of both locations. She very much so works in the business, and I try to, you know, allow that to free me up to work on the business.
Yeah. Good partnership.
Yeah, it works well. I mean, I'll be honest with you, we don't talk about much else anymore. Kids are growing up,
Right.
and we have this business, and so it seems like every conversation we have has something to do with it.
Yeah, and that's what I've enjoyed was getting to know you and understanding kind of what your desire was out of the business. And I mean, we had a lot of great conversations up front. And as you were trying to figure out, how to continue growing that location, how to start looking at additional growth opportunities. And I think that was one of the most interesting parts was as you were trying to figure out whether to expand in the existing location, whether to continue growing into a new location and all that. So let's talk about kind of that, what that
So we
process
did.
was.
So we did both.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what was that process with the existing landlord kind of because now you're on two different floors, right? You were on the top floor for your
Yeah.
first space. Now you've gone to the first floor, which is kind of opposite of what typically you'd want to do, right?
Yep. And we didn't relocate reception. We kept all of our reception, conference rooms, everything on third floor. So our first floor really is just purely overflow office space. We put 20 new offices in there, and we added an additional break room. We were trying to balance between putting the right amenities on a floor that we were expanding into without creating a secondary community, right? Because you wanted everybody to have the community aspect more on the floor that the community managers were on. And so I honestly don't recommend expanding onto multiple floors. When you have a small staff, it's just hard to keep up with everything in both places. It's almost like having two locations, even though they're in the same building. But it's doable, and it works. But we have a hard time getting the people on the first floor to come join us on the third floor for the things that
Yeah.
we're doing when we get together. So
Seems like a little thing, but people are, the inertia of staying where you are is strong sometimes.
well, and the other thing that's kind of interesting is we also did a few things because you learn things as you go, and we built a couple of enterprise suites on the first floor. So we built a 4 office suite and a 5 office suite that are all
Oh,
behind. They can be individually contracted, but you could also put there's all 5 of them are behind one door and 4 of them are behind one door. So you could also, create that. And so funny enough, the first offices that sold was the 5 office
hmm.
suite,
Wow.
which I was pleasantly
Yeah.
surprised.
Hmm.
And we also do longer term agreements on those just because those are typically, enterprise level customers typically are used to a little bit longer agreement and they're capable of doing it. But I was just surprised that that one went first as an experiment that we were doing. And even after that, multiple people would ask us, hey, when does that come available?
Hmm.
So it tells me that that market is definitely out there. And I know, again, you listen to all the, you go to GWA and other things, and people talk about the enterprise opportunities that are out there, and they really are out there. I don't think we really focus on that so much as office evolution. That's not really in our lane, is the way I would put that. But it's capable, right? You can get
Hmm.
people across the hall next door to each other, things like that. But putting them all behind closed door was interesting in a way to do it. But again, I recommend if you're going to do an expansion, try to do it as a extension of your existing floor plan. The only advantage I really found it on different floors is you don't have to go with the exact same furniture package. So if you're doing it 3 years later, you don't have to find the
You,
exact furniture from 3 years ago. That's really the only advantage. And then
Yeah, and
Georgetown,
so
go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was saying in Georgetown, so I've known Geo through all of that process, starting with the expansion, even before the expansion, and then Georgetown was part of my development area, and so the biggest limiting factor in our area is there's not a lot of Class A commercial
mm,
space, and so that makes it difficult because landlords still have a lot of leverage. And it also just makes it difficult because the opportunities just aren't very plentiful to figure out where you want to go and find something that maybe you could reuse some existing bones from a previous build out. My Round Rock location, we were brand new building, brand new tenant, but my Georgetown location, it's a 20-year-old building where we're coming in as a complete and total retrofit as a second gen space that as you can see from the overhead that's above Geo's in there, there's a lot of reworking of a lot of that HVAC that you see hanging
so
around in
did you have
there.
to open it up and then move HVAC to, okay. It's
Fire
really cool.
sprinkler, HVAC, you
Yeah.
name it. And the challenge with it is you don't know what you don't know until you do the demo. And then you see what you see, and you're like, "Oh, I didn't expect that to be there." And then if you don't have good documentation on the building to begin with, it's really kind of shocking what you see when you finally take it all apart, and then you got to figure out how you're going to put it all back in. And and I like the exposed ceiling. I think most people do.
Yeah.
Most people comment about it. You can just fit more into it above ceiling, and it just feels more spacious.
Yeah. Light, bright, more spacious, modern. Yeah, it looks great.
Yep.
Yeah.
My landlord in Georgetown was fantastic through that process. My building is owned by three guys that are all engineers. So they had a great respect and understanding for some of what those challenges are. And very much so worked with me with my GC to try to figure out, like, where are we going to put the units? They're going to serve all these different zones, because that's the other thing that people don't realize. But you're not like a typical company. Not everybody's going to work with their door open all day. They usually work with their door closed. Well, that wreaks havoc on HVAC systems that don't have enough zoning,
Yeah.
because you inevitably will never keep it cool or heated the way you want to. So anyway, but they were great to work with. And, from really the beginning, trying to press the issue to get the lease done when we did. I was on vacation. I don't even know where Geo was. We were shuffling documents over Christmas break,
Oh boy.
trying to get the deal done before the end of the year, because they needed it to show a lease to go back and do a refi on the building. So, there's a lot of moving parts. I personally like that. I like the energy of, deals. And so, it's frustrating sometimes, but it's rewarding always when you're done. Sometimes it's rewarding because you kick it to the curb and you're done with it. But most times it's rewarding because, if you're that far along in a deal, nobody wants to give up,
Yeah.
right? They want to get it done.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And I mean, I think one of the interesting parts about it is, like you were talking about the landlord. There's always fun things that come up, right? As especially you're getting into older building. I mean, if you remember the first time we toured that floor, the HVAC units were actually window units on the balconies.
They're on the balconies. They were residential.
And we're just like, where do those go to, and what are they used for? And those have to go away, right, Lee? And so we went back and forth, and unfortunately, you uncovered some skeletons afterwards, right?
Yeah.
And,
Yep.
and luckily, we were able to work through that stuff. But I think that the important part is really understanding, what it is you're trying to get into as best as possible.
Yeah, it's really funny. The architect of this building is actually a member of our Round Rock space.
Oh,
He
very cool.
he designed the building and actually occupied space in the building for a number of years. And he's still around the Austin area, but much smaller now. And he's actually a tenant or a member in our Round Rock space. He's fun. He's crazy, but he's fun.
Yeah. And I mean, and the interesting part is, not only are they your landlord, but they're also clients. And so sometimes you have to maneuver through those relationships and everything else. And I think that's part of back to your community part is,
Yeah.
you and I've had a couple of those conversations. We're like, okay, well, what hill are we willing to die on here?
Yeah.
And why?
Well, and you never want to burn a bridge in any of the negotiation that you do. And so, and Jim, what Gio's referring to is, so they were on the fourth floor of the building, and they gave up their space for an existing tenant on the fourth floor to take the entirety of that floor. So they still needed office space. So now I am the landlord of my landlord.
Okay. That's why I was like, wait, what? Okay.
They took a corner office in our space.
Yeah. Mara's had that before too, I think. That's always an interesting, vibe. Okay, so with your franchise agreement, you get a development area, or what's next?
That's a good question. I doing the second one was way easier than doing the first one.
Yeah.
You're just smarter.
Yeah.
And
more confidence, more clarity about what you want and how it works. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can correct for things that you can't correct for. The two things you can't change after you do one of these, and I've heard you say this numerous times, you can't change where you're located, and you can't hardly change your build out. So they're really important to get right. And so it just makes sense that you would get better and better at it as you do more and more of them. I don't know what's next. Samsung has made major investment in an area very close to us out in Taylor, Texas, which is another suburb town of Austin. And Samsung Real Estate Development Group has been a member of our Round Rock space for a long time. I don't know if that's supposed to be public information or not, but they are doing commercial developments in around the semiconductor plant out there. And they've already asked us to come in and put an Office Evolution in that development, which it's probably 5 years from now. But funny enough, I asked my wife if she's ready to do the third one. And
Mhm.
no, she said, well, if you do a third one, you'll be doing it without me.
She might have said that about the second one too,
I-
if we're being honest. I
and
think
I
that
don't know
might
if
have
I'm
been the
willing to
conversation.
test, Jamie. I don't know if I'm willing to test if that means like in life or just in our
Totally.
business.
Oh boy. I was like, well, you
Yeah.
can't say that about having kids. You could
Yeah.
survive, you know.
Well, this year, I guess we'll have been married 32 years this year. So
Woo.
yeah. So anyway, right now I am always going to, two things. I'm always looking and everything's always for sale.
Nice. Yep.
So I'm always open-minded about both of those things to not let an opportunity, pass
Yep.
you by. And if I did another one, I don't know how I would do it. I did both of these really just with bank lending and
Wait,
it's pretty.
SBA or traditional loan?
I did the first one SBA, did the second one conventional.
Okay.
It's for what our model is, it's pretty expensive, right? I mean, it's a pretty significant capital investment to do the build outs that we do. And we're not even doing, what some of the other players in the space do, where they do, minimum 25,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Even our Venture X vast partners who start at those levels, but they typically are doing it with groups of investors. And for us, for the Office Evolution folks, it's usually sole
A single.
proprietorships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's a lot to bite off and chew.
Yep.
It's got to work
Mm-hmm.
in most cases. So, but if you do it right and don't make bad moves along the way, typically works out. But it makes it hard to just say, yeah, I'm ready to do another one.
Totally. No, 100%. It's a big investment. And to your point, then it's got to work.
Yeah. That's kind of what I never wanted to do. One of my longtime colleagues, I would say, is probably my number one mentor. He came up with this term years ago when we were in the industry together. He just retired, like officially retired. He called it pre-retirement. So I've considered myself in pre-retirement since 2016, where you get to do what you want to do versus what, waking up and always doing what you have to do. But if you're not careful and you take on too much debt,
Yep.
you're going to get stuck doing
Then there are some things you have to do. Yeah, exactly.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And so that's something I try to balance
Mhm.
and, don't take lightly the way we do things. And that's why I say I always am listening for what people want to do. And for all I know, somebody will approach me and say, hey, I want to use your know-how and I'm going to front the money.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Maybe something I'd be willing to do.
Yep.
So much to figure out. So it's funny, you talked about Zach earlier, your son, and kind of where he's
Okay.
at in his career. I've had the opportunity to talk to him
Yeah.
a few times based off of some of the things he's looking at. So, if you were to say the things that Zach looks up to you the most about, what would those three things be?
Probably odd to say, but he's literally very mature for his age, 21 going on 22. And, he's actually thanked me for being, a bit of a disciplinarian and being stern and his upbringing to teach him, work reward, to teach him to respect how to work in a team environment, do some of the things that I think a lot of people his age don't know how to do very well. And so just being accountable, I think he would thank me for, forcing the understanding of what accountability really means, teaching him, that there's a great reward if you're willing to put in the invest and put in the work. I think those are two of the things. And my daughter as well. My daughter is 16 months older than him, and she's a nurse in a PICU unit.
Wow.
So, they both have thanked Susie and I for instilling some, just some values that I think are going to live with them for the rest of their lives. And to me, that's pretty important, right? Those are, I joke with people, and I used to, when we hired thousands of people in the industry I was in, there's things that people have to come to the table with as people that
Yeah.
their employer can't teach them. And so they either do or they don't. And if they don't, it's a real risk to take on those people. And so we always try to get our kids to understand, how to be good at those things and to value those things so that they will be themselves valuable to others, whether it's personal relationships or professional relationships.
And so what do you look up to the most about him?
He's coachable. Probably number one thing is he is coachable and he's interested. He has high initiative to seek to want to be coached to get better. So he seeks growth always. And to me, those are, I think, very admirable things in a world where I don't think a lot of people do that so much anymore. I think a lot of people want things easier than they're willing to work for them. And so it delights me to see him willing to do, the things that others aren't willing to do. I told him your biggest challenge is going to be in short amount of time, i.e. an interview, getting somebody else to understand that about you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. But he is a very intelligent young man. I've really enjoyed my conversations with him and
Yeah. Well,
just getting to hear what.
I appreciate you reaching out and attempting to mentor him and some of the opportunities he's been looking at. The other thing I would tell you that I think it's a very important characteristic, I think it's why you and I get along, Gio. He's very genuine. Like, he's not interested in trying to fool you into thinking he's going to deliver something he's not interested in delivering.
Mm.
So if you like what his quantity is, you'll love him. If you don't, he's okay with that. And he'll move on and you'll move on and everything will be fine. But that's the other thing that I think a lot of people, especially with social media these days, right? People are so interested in, trying to delight others in ways that is a bit fraudulent.
Mm.
Nobody posts anything bad on social media that
Yep.
happens to them. They only post the great times, the good things. And interestingly, our kids they were not allowed to have cell phones until they were going into high school.
Lee,
And
nice job.
Jamie's.
that was
That's
hard.
Amazing.
Jamie. That's I
Well, there's
should
so
know.
much research now that says that like their brains are not developed enough to handle it.
Well,
Like
I'll be honest.
technically,
We hung out with people that their kids had them sooner, and then when we would go out in groups, family
Yeah.
groups, and like they would be, there was a term for it called socializing. Kids would be sitting at a table staring at screens and not interacting with each other.
Yeah.
And then that just went off the charts during the pandemic, right? Because we
Mm-hmm.
normalized isolation.
Yep.
And so people who are already attuned to that or accustomed to that, who live life through the lens of a screen,
Yeah.
just got further entrenched in that world. And, I love the saying that somebody came up with, go touch grass. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of people that just
Yep.
need to go touch grass.
Yeah. It's such a hard, we won't go down this rabbit hole, but we have some neighbors, and I literally said to the kid a couple weekends ago, I was like, are you just gonna live your whole life inside of that screen? Like
Yeah.
but you when you're that's the problem when the parents enable it, the kids they don't understand the difference. Like they cannot help themselves. So the parents have to do it for them because that kid doesn't know any difference. He doesn't know what he's wasting. And
Yeah.
it's a big problem. It's really,
Well, we all know like kids are paying attention from the time they can,
yeah.
see and hear. And so whatever you're doing, they're probably going to emulate it. So, you know, they may not say it, may
Yeah.
not even come up in a conversation, but I promise you, when you're not looking, they're acting like you. So be cognizant of that. Full-time
Yeah.
job as a parent. It's
Totally. No
truly the
pressure.
most full-time job there
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, that's And I think that's a big part of it, right? Is they take everything in.
Hmm. Yeah.
Well, I think that they
Yeah. So
take
it's
everything
fun.
in, right? They hear everything, they see everything. You know, it's funny. We joke around about how Dagny's our editor because we know that if she hears certain things that are inappropriate, that Jamie's going to get in trouble, and it's not me. So I've got to be extra careful with those things without a doubt. So, well, I have a question. I have a question for you now from overall, we kind of touched on it earlier, and you said you've been super busy and have been super involved. But I mean, I think, a big part about our industry is just relationships, right? And our
Sure.
relationship and how it's grown and how, you could call and we could have conversations about different things and, how much I know you listen to the podcast and other things. And I think that's part of what some of these operators, especially within the vast umbrella, don't recognize, right? Because y'all have the annual vast
Yeah. Yeah.
conferences or, different platforms. And so how do we, I think a big important part is how do we get more people to attend the industry events, right? Whether it be Juicy, GWA, MRSA events, kind of jump in and really be a bigger part of that.
Yeah.
I mean, so kind of what's been your experience and kind of, what would you say about, that overall community that's built in those environments?
Well, so I am a life learner, and so for me, it's personally interesting to seek out additional relationships, specifically seek out relationships with people that aren't like me. It's boring if you're, surrounding yourself with nothing but the people that are like yourself. It becomes an echo chamber of sorts. Being in a franchise system is great. We have a lot of support there. We have additional support with now 3 brands in our vast umbrella, which that's also interesting. And I think Jason and Paula and the team are doing a good job to try to cross pollinate each other for, just not just, member services, products and things like that, but just exposure to each other through the conferences that we have. So I think that's good. Of course, that never existed prior to UFG purchasing OE and already then being the owner of Venture X and now also adding to the mix IO. But I would encourage people, and I know there are a few in our fabric that do attend the other events and the other, trade show events, and I know they get a lot out of them. So, I think it's important that try to get out to, at least one every other year, if not one a year. Some people, they dig that stuff. And so they're going to go just because they love the social aspect of it. I've done so many trade shows in my past life experience. I personally can't stand them.
Mhm.
But I think I told you this once before, Gio. I did triathlons for a while, and I did it really by the encouragement of my best friend and his wife, and Susie and I did them. And it was the craziest thing, right? I'm used to doing a lot. I'm very competitive and I played lots of sports in my upbringing, you know, and I've never seen like the encouraging environment of people that are total strangers that surround the race routes, not in the water, but once you're on your bike and once you're running,
Yeah.
I mean, there's people just cheering you on that they they have no idea. I mean, maybe they're related to somebody in the race. I have no idea. But that level of kind of camaraderie and that is at the race sites was pretty cool to me. And I actually think there is a big correlation of that in the co-working
Mm.
industry community as well, right? So when you go to these events where you have some people that are direct competitors to you in your own market, people are generally, I think, and genuinely pretty helpful to one another.
Yeah.
So you're
And
missing
I mean,
that.
I think that's what I love about our industry. That's what I
Yeah.
love about our industry. I still remember when Jamie and I started having conversations about the podcast, right? And she's like, "So how do we monetize?" I'm like, I just want to serve the community and give back, right?" And I think,
Yeah.
I think that's such a big part of it back to the community and everything that you mentioned is
Yep.
the more that we can help each other, the more it helps us all kind of get through stuff. And so, I mean, I think for me that's such an important part is how do we continue lifting each other up because this industry is only getting stronger. There was a webinar today that was Collier, CBRE, JLL, and Cushman, and it was all their heads talking about the future of Flex and how an enterprise is using it. So I think
Is
it's
that where
just going to
you,
get stronger and stronger.
that's what you were talking about at the Ask Me Anything today? That was the event you were talking about,
Yeah,
Geo?
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I didn't know what you were referencing because I
Yes.
had no reference point. But yeah, I agree with that. And I took something from you very early, which is, they call it mystery shopping. And I don't mind if my franchisor mystery shops me and gives me a scorecard of how well we're doing. I think that's valuable. And I don't want to know that I'm being mystery shopped in that context. But something I took from you a long time ago is I wear my Office Evolution shirt and I go visit competitors. And I do it because I want to know what they do and I want to know what they do well. And it tells me where we're directly competitive and where I need to know that. And it also tells me, what we don't do well or what we don't do at all. And I know where to
Yeah.
send them. And I found that if you do that, they'll reciprocate in most cases, unless there's commissions involved. And then sometimes not, they still try to force square pegs into round holes. But I do agree with you. Like the industry itself is just getting bigger. The real risk for any industry that's been in a double-digit growth mode like we have been, that was one of the original attractions of this industry. It's only gotten better since the pandemic, right? We're an example industry bigger post-pandemic than smaller. And the cost of what we do is a bit of a self-gating kind of phenomenon that prevents, one of these popping up on every corner inside a year.
Yep.
And so I think there's time to also have very responsible growth from the operator side to complement the demand that continues to grow, from the member or user side. And so I don't know, that's why I think you should always be attending events and, sharing with your neighbors what you're doing and them with you. And, so you can know, you can kind of have an idea. And also you can figure out like, am I any good at this? Am I even doing this the way it should be done? I walk
Yeah.
into a lot of places and there's nobody there that greets you. And I find
Right.
that floors me.
I think yes, Geo, that's one of Geo's signals too, or it drives me nuts if there's somebody there, but they're on their phone and they have their like Starbucks coffee in front of them. No, I
Well, I
want
mean,
you drinking house coffee, no phones.
well,
You're
and I've
at
been into
work.
places not trying to like be like sleuthy, just
Yeah.
walking in. I'm clearly branded, and I'm down two or three hallways before I run into anybody that says, "Can I help you?"
Yeah. Although, so this, I wanted to fit in a sort of tactical question before we move on. I do think, sort of back to the business model, there's a big barrier to entry, and then, a lot of spaces run pretty leanly. So it is
Mhm.
not that easy to make sure somebody's at the front desk at all times.
I agree.
Lee, how do you manage that? What does your team look like at your locations, including your lovely wife?
So since my wife has come into the business, it has been easier, right? So we have two, and the OE model has typically been, a single community manager or what we call business center manager. And the owner may or may not be involved. The owner may or may not be
Yeah.
present. In our case, Susie and I both are pretty present, and she's especially present in one of the two locations. And it's made it easier just because we have a lot of overlap. And I noticed that even when we had Round Rock, even when it was only 8,500 square feet, it's a one plus some fractional amount FTE.
Totally.
It's
Yep.
not 1.0.
Yeah, it's not 1.0, but it's not 2. The P&L can't handle the 2. So
Correct.
yeah.
Correct. So,
Yep.
but you have to know that, right?
Hmm.
And so, or you have to design to where that doesn't matter, right? So,
Yep.
like if you have more of your space, with a lot more technology implemented and where it's more self-serving, then maybe you can get away with less people. But I think, I mean, humanity likes to be greeted
Humans
with
like other
a
humans.
smile.
Yes.
Yeah. Like
Yep.
that. I don't want nobody, and I don't want a
Yep.
robot.
Hmm.
So I think that's important. I also think it's an interesting part of our business because
Yeah.
I saw it even in the telecommunications industry. One of the first things that would go away in businesses is they would get rid of people at the front desk, right? You would have a complete and built out reception desk and then nobody at it anymore. And all the phones, because at that time, we were transitioning in that technology time from a single person answering the phones and transferring calls to you could take a call directly at your desk wherever your desk was in the space. So guess who got nixed? Reception,
Yeah.
right? Because it wasn't a revenue generating piece, it was just a cost generating item. And so lots of companies got rid of their reception. But I felt like the companies that were smart didn't. They figured out a way to continue to have that person, a real person, still greet people that came into that office. If nothing else, also be a gatekeeper for who could go further into the office.
Yeah. Right. As you're, rolling in, walking down the hallways.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yes, I could talk about this for hours too. I mean, there's research that shows because we're also in the middle, to your point about the isolation, loneliness epidemic, it doesn't take a lot for people to feel less lonely, right? More connected.
Mhm.
And that person at the front desk can play that role, even if it's pretty minimal. How are the kids? How's the dog? Cute shoes. It's I think it just matters a lot. I think that will continue to matter. So
It,
you have
it even matters to people that say it doesn't.
totally. I think that's totally true. Hmm. Yeah. It's like they don't recognize that it matters and what an impact it has, but it
They're
does.
the first people to tell you when they came in and somebody wasn't
Nobody
there.
was there. Totally. That's really funny. Yep. Yeah. Which so your wife augments the team, but it is
Mhm.
one at
Yeah.
each, yeah, location.
We try very hard not to be in the same place at the same time, unless there's a reason to be in the same place at the
Right.
same time. And so that gives us that one plus
Yeah.
factor. Sometimes it's 2.0 because we're both fully there
Yep.
for hours on end. But the way this model has always been sold is the semi-absentee model. And so,
Yep.
and I have
For
another
the owner.
company.
Yeah.
I still have a consulting company that I still do technology consulting to keep up with the industry that I spent, 2.5 decades in. And I still thoroughly enjoy that. But sometimes I just come to one of our two offices and I just work, for the day out of that office, like a day pass or like,
Yeah.
a flex office member. We try to have an office of our own to have like as the manager's office, if you
Yeah.
will. But it's a good thing to never have a manager's
It's a good
office.
thing to sell that office.
Yeah,
Totally.
exactly. We
Yep.
gladly give it up.
Yep.
I mean, I joke that everything we have that's in the manager's office is on wheels. Like it can be gone in 10 minutes if you're ready to move in.
100%. Totally. Okay, Gio. Any other questions before we're about to expire on our time with Lee?
No, I just love talking to Lee just because he's got, what, 4 other careers before this, and he's just so straightforward and genuine. And,
Yeah.
I've enjoyed getting to know you better, Lee, and spending time with you. And, certainly I've appreciated your business and just love the opportunity to just work
Yep.
with good people.
Yeah, I think that's why we get along so well, though, Gio, because we operate in a kind of a mirror image approach to what we do. I joke with people, but I'm very serious. Like I've never been the mile wide, inch deep guy. I'm always the inch wide, mile deep guy. I
Yeah.
invest a lot in the relationships that I have, but because I do, it means I can't have a gazillion relationships and truly give those people what I would want from them and call that a relationship.
No, without a doubt. Well, appreciate you taking time to have this conversation with us, and I look forward to you hearing yourself on your dog walk.
Yeah. I thought it'd be interesting. Yeah. And the other thing I would tell you, Gio, it's not that hard in what we do as a business. Like I've heard Seinfeld's references on this podcast before too. And the when George has the multiple personalities of himself and his personal George runs into his work George. I don't have enough energy to
Mm,
manage multiple me's. I have to
mhm.
be me 24/7. And some people love that, and other people it frustrates them. But I am who I am, and that's who I am, and I'm going to be that way 24/7.
Love it. Well, and
And we love that.
yes, and being in business for yourself affords you the choice to do that, which I think sometimes we forget what a gift that can be. I was really quickly, I needed to like, get out of the house and I went down. We have a new like I don't know if the residence inn or whatever, and I sat in the lobby and there were these two women in their business casual they were on the same like conference call and I was like I could have played a drinking game with the number of like the whatever cliche, corporate lingo. I was like felt like I had dropped into like a whole different world. I mean, used to live in that and you probably did too. And it's
Yeah.
just it reminded me, I was like, oh, that's a choice. you know, to do that. When
Yeah.
you wake up some days and you're like, man, this is hard, being in business for yourself and, doing all the things for yourself. And I was like, oh, or I could do that. No, thanks.
Yeah. There's trade-offs to everything, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. We go back to what we talked about earlier. I'm willing to work hard no matter what it is I'm doing. I just enjoy working that hard for things that are rewarding to myself and my family
Yeah.
more so than oftentimes in corporate America to other people that just don't really care.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll officially let you go now. It was great to meet you, Lee. And we'll have to catch up again and maybe sometime we'll see you in person.
Yep. Well, I would see y'all at Juicy, but I'm not going to Juicy. I think
Maybe we'll
that's the
see you in the
weekend
next
of
one.
is it graduation? I can't even remember.
Oh, could be. It's
Yeah.
a
Something
couple weeks
important.
away. We're super close. Yes.
Yeah, Liz is mad at me, but that's okay.
Well, it's easy to make Liz mad. Maybe we'll see you at
Okay.
the next one. Thank you, Lee.
Okay. Nice meeting you, Jamie. Take care, Gio.